Non-selective alpha and beta blockers include drugs carvedilol and labetalol. These cardiac medications target both beta-adrenergic receptors and alpha-1 receptors. This non-selective action leads to a variety of different clinical effects, including decreased cardiac output, vasodilation, and decreased blood pressure via a host of interconnected mechanisms. In this scene, we'll cover the mechanisms of action, clinical uses, and adverse effects of these drugs so you can crush it come test day. Welcome to the Sculpture Museum, a hub of culture and innovation. And if you're really lucky, we'll get to see one of the carvers hard at work. Oh look, there's one right over there. Let this carver anchor you to the drug carvedilol, one of the major non-selective alpha-beta blockers we'll cover in this video. You know how every major piece of art has a label telling visitors what it is? Well, this carving is no different, with that massive label on its base. Let this label anchor you to the other drug of focus in this scene, labetalol. So that's a carver for carvedilol and a label for labetalol. You with me? Okay, let's move on. Take a look at this little troublemaker over here, with the lollipop in his mouth. Looks like this kid is up to no good with this mischievous expression on his face. Let the lollipop here remind you that we're talking about beta blockers with their common lol drug ending, like carvedilol and labetalol. Keep in mind this lol suffix is common to all beta blockers, not just the alpha and beta blocking ones covered in this video. It looks like our troublemaker managed to get a shot out of his BB gun before his mom realized, which hit our carver spot on. It's lucky that the mother noticed and slapped the BB gun right out of her kid's hand. Now, a BB gun is Pixarize's recurring symbol for beta-1 receptors. You know, since BB represents beta, and 1 is our recurring rhyme for the number 1. So it's the beta-1 BB gun. Let this mom knocking down the beta-1 BB gun remind you that labetalol and carvedilol are beta-1 antagonists, or blockers. It's worth noting that all beta blockers have beta-1 blocking effects. This effect primarily targets beta-1 receptors on the heart, where beta-1 blockade leads to decreased heart rate and contractility, causing an overall reduction in cardiac output. Got that? Let's move on to discuss the other mechanisms of these drugs. Just as our carver was working on the most delicate part of his carving, looks like that BB pellet caused his hands to slip, breaking part of the carving right off. This snapped off part of the carving fell onto his boat shoes, crushing them. Here at Pixarize, boat shoes are our recurring symbol for beta-2 receptors, since boat shoes represents beta and shoe rhymes with 2, right? It's the beta-2 boat shoes. And these boat shoes are getting crushed, which helps you remember that beta-2 receptors are blocked or antagonized. So altogether, this should help you remember that carvedilol and labetalol also block beta-2 receptors. Now, let's review what we know about beta-2 receptors. Beta-2 receptors exist on a variety of tissues, including vascular smooth muscle and bronchial smooth muscle. Blockade of beta-2 receptors therefore leads to mild vasoconstriction and bronchoconstriction. The vasoconstrictive effects are not very important, as we'll discuss next, but the bronchoconstrictive effects means that these drugs can cause worsening of respiratory symptoms in patients with asthma and COPD. Make sense? To make matters worse for our carver, it looks like he also kicked over his lunch after the carving smashed into his boat shoes. And out pops, you know what? A bottle of A1 sauce that shatters after hitting the floor. What a tragic sight. A1 sauce is so good. At Pixarize, A1 sauce is our recurring symbol for alpha-1 receptors. Get it? Since A1 just stands for alpha-1, right? And this A1 sauce is broken, which should help you remember that alpha-1 receptors are antagonized or blocked by carvedilol and labetalol. So what does blocking alpha-1 receptors do anyway? Well, recall that alpha-1 receptors primarily function at vascular smooth muscle to induce vasoconstriction. Blockade of alpha-1 receptors therefore leads to the opposite, vessel dilation, with a reduction in vascular resistance and systemic blood pressure. This vasodilating effect far outweighs the vasoconstricting effects of beta-2 blockade, meaning that the overall effect of taking these drugs is to induce vessel dilation and a decrease in blood pressure. Clinically, these mechanisms mean that labetalol and carvedilol are primarily used in the treatment of hypertension and heart failure. Let me explain. The beta 1 blocking effects reduce cardiac output, while alpha 1 blocking effects reduce systemic vascular resistance. These cause a synergistic decrease in blood pressure, since less blood goes into the arterial system, which is itself already dilated, to reduce pressure on the vessel walls. This decrease in pressure is obviously useful to treat hypertension. This reduced pressure also reduces afterload the heart has to pump against, further reducing the workload of the heart that was already reduced by beta 1 blockade. This means that both carvedilol and labetalol are quite useful in the chronic management of heart failure. Lastly, drugs like labetalol may be used in cases of cocaine overdose, which can lead to excess beta 1 and alpha 1 stimulation to cause hypertensive crisis. In these cases, the dual alpha and beta function is crucial to avoid the unopposed alpha activity that could occur if you give a selective beta blocker. Now, I don't want you to memorize this laundry list of clinical uses. Instead, you should know that carvedilol and labetalol hit beta 1, beta 2, and alpha 1 receptors, then know your receptor physiology to infer the rest. The same can be said for the side effects, which are largely dependent on the receptor physiology. We have a dedicated video on those receptors. You should check them out sometime. Alright, that wasn't too bad, was it? Let's summarize. Carvedilol and labetalol are non-selective alpha and beta blockers that block alpha 1, beta 1, and beta 2 receptors. Altogether, these effects reduce cardiac output and reduce systemic blood pressure by way of vasodilation. Carvedilol and labetalol are often used for the treatment of hypertension and heart failure, and they may also be used to combat the cardiovascular effects of cocaine use. And we're finished here. This may be the last we see of our carving, but it certainly isn't the last of the beta-blocking drugs. We'll see you in the next one.